this show brings you an awareness of what you may be going through in your relationship, then please love yourself more than you love your partner or abuser.
So we encourage you. You do the same for yourself. Confront and be brave to protect yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Stephen and Corey. Hey, I'm Stephen
And I'm Corey.
Oh, awesome. It's season number 5 already. That's really hard to believe.
I know.
We're still
it
having
is.
a lot of fun.
It is, yeah.
We have a really heavy show for you guys. The topic is rather heavy, but it would just kind of give you a little bit of a preview. Have you ever heard the message or ever said the thing when you were a kid? You know, you might be outside playing or whatever in your neighborhood, and you're saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Okay? Well, if you've ever said that as a kid, for sure, now as an adult, especially if you're in marriage, that does not work.
No.
That is not true, right?
No, it's not true.
Yeah.
And we're going to cover some of that pain. It's called emotional abuse in marriage.
Wow, yeah.
And it's not, we're usually lighthearted and we have these fun conversations and we're giggling.
Yeah.
But
we're tackling a tough one today.
We are, and that's out of request.
Right,
So if we're getting requests from people, and as you know, our history, Stephen and I used to teach marriage classes, and we've done some marriage counseling for some of those that came out of our classes. This is a real issue.
Right, exactly.
And if you are going through this, we don't want you to feel like we don't talk about that. We just don't talk about that. Well, guess what? We do. We talk about everything.
Everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table. You guys have heard us talk about many things that most people don't want to talk about. And so with that, we just want to invite you back to Stephen and Corey and get it together. Can't believe it's our 5th season. Right. This is the podcast, like I said before, we dive into the real, raw, and relatable aspects of relationships, marriage, and life. I'm your friendly host, as you guys know, and unofficial cheerleader for Love Done Right. But you know what? Sometimes love isn't done right, is it?
Exactly. And I'm Stephen, and today's episode is for anyone going through or even just thinking about one of the biggest injuries to a marriage, which is emotional abuse. And look, before you say I do, or if you are living in a marriage surrounded by emotional abuse, have you ever asked yourself these questions? It's like, where do I get help, right? Or how do I properly heal? Or do we work together or separately to heal myself and our marriage? So today we're talking about why couples counseling does not work. Why it does not work for couples who are in an emotionally abusive relationship. This is probably a shocker, right? It's one of those things that's true. And so when there is a narcissist and emotional abuse going on, couples counseling is not suggested as a help for healing.
That's right. The strong statement stems from a deep understanding. Remember, a deep understanding of the dynamics involved in such relationships and the potential harm.
Right, yeah.
Because couples counseling doesn't work in an emotional abusive relationship. Unlike typical relational conflicts where both partners, they may share responsibility, emotional abuse is often one-sided.
Wow.
And traditional couples counseling approaches fail to address this imbalance effectively. Instead, they may exacerbate the victim's pain and perpetuate the abusive cycle. So think about that. Let's start by understanding emotional abuse in relationships. Emotional abuse involves a pattern or behavior where one partner systematically undermines the other's sense of self-worth, autonomy, and emotional well-being. Narcissistic abuse is a subset of emotional abuse.
Wow.
Often it involves manipulation, gaslighting, and other forms of psychological control. In such dynamics like that, the perpetrator frequently exhibits narcissistic traits.
That's crazy. And since we spoke about gaslighting, we're going to give you actually the definition of that abuse because most people really don't know what that means.
Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where someone tries to make another person doubt their own sanity.
Can you stop for a second there? Psychological manipulation.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Their own sanity, perception of reality, even memories.
Wow.
It's a tactic used to gain power and control over someone by making them question their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. This can lead to the victim becoming increasingly dependent on the manipulator and feeling confused, anxious, and isolated. Hear that? They become increasingly dependent on the manipulator or the abuser and feeling confused, anxious, and isolated. Have you ever seen those people? And you might know, you might be one of them, but you know those couples, and all of a sudden you don't hear from your friend anymore. Or the family says, we never hear from him. We never hear from her, because they're getting isolated. They're feeling isolated. They're being told that they need to be more involved with that partner, that abuser, than anyone else in their lives.
So the abuser may use tactics such as blame shifting, minimization of their actions. And by the way, here's a definition that Corey's got on minimization of actions.
Yeah, let me read that to you too. Minimization, okay. The act of or process of minimizing, the act of lowering something to its smallest value or extent. The act of lowering something or someone to its smallest value or extent. The process of finding the minimum value of a function or of a person. The act of reducing someone to the least possible amount or degree or position. That is so sad.
It's crazy.
Think about this. They're pushing you down. They're pushing someone so they feel like they're less than.
Yeah.
Most cases, those abusers are the ones who feel less than.
Right.
So they have to push the other person down and minimize who they are so they can control them.
Right.
It's such a sad situation, but this is real life, you guys. As we said, we're going to talk to you about the real deal of relationships and marriage. And if you're experiencing this before you marry, do not say I do. Do not get into a marriage. And if you're in a marriage, do not go to couples counseling together.
Right.
And we're going to obviously talk more about that, but this is what this is for, to help you bring back the real you and who you are.
Exactly. And, believe it or not, there's even more tactics. And they include things like rationalization and justification, provoking or inciting a defensive response from the victim, and gaslighting. The victim often finds themselves, in a shrinking world.
Yeah, that minimizing, losing their voice.
All right, and they lose their voice, lose confidence, and the ability to stand up for themselves.
Yeah. So without addressing the abuser's harmful behaviors first, couples counseling can actually reinforce those patterns instead of resolving them.
Right.
The problem with using traditional couples counseling, as everybody wants to do, is it's built on the premise that both partners contribute equally to relational conflict and issues that they can take responsibility for together to collaborate to resolve them.
And
however,
I want you to chat in here for a second. Almost always, it's never, ever even in terms of the dedication to fixing it or getting help. Almost always that person who is the abuser and the narcissist, they don't think they have a problem.
No, they don't want to get help.
They don't think they have a problem.
No, they don't.
You have a problem, right?
Yeah, it's true. So, however, when emotional abuse is present, this assumption does not hold true. The abuser's actions dominate the dynamics, leaving the victim in a position where they cannot engage in therapy on an equal footing because they feel lost. So misguided assumptions in traditional counseling, that therapist may mistakenly view the relationship as a two-way street, assuming both partners share responsibility for communication, breakdowns, and conflict. But that approach often leads to assigning blame to the victim. Think about that. For reactive behaviors while overlooking the abuser's manipulative tactics. So along with treating surface level symptoms without addressing the root cause, which is the abuse, those errors can result in secondary abuse, where the victim now becomes and feels more unheard, invalidation, and further traumatized. Traumatization to that poor person who's just trying to get some help. When you're in a couples counseling, that therapist is not built for the narcissistic abuser. That therapist is built for the two of you coming together.
That's right.
So don't deny that for yourself, and don't say, okay, I'll go in, when you know, or now you know, that is not where you need to be.
Yeah, I mean, they have to buy into it. They have to buy into it because, again, as we look at this, I feel the emotions, even as we're going through this.
Absolutely.
Even as we're going through this. So let's talk about, first, the abusive partner must demonstrate a willingness for therapy in their personal work to acknowledge their harmful behaviors through a process of identifying and addressing their patterns of emotional abuse. And then next, they must commit, okay, to making consistent efforts to repair the damage done by engaging in healing actions and continue in personal therapy to rebuild trust and safety between both partners.
Yes, true. And without these steps, any attempt at couples counseling is premature and likely to harm the victim further. Remember that. So consider these steps towards healing instead of jumping into couples counseling. A safer approach involves, as we said before, number one, individual therapy for the abuser.
Yeah.
That therapy should be focused on unlearning harmful behaviors, developing empathy, and adopting healthier relational patterns. Then number two, support for the victim, providing a safe space for the victim to process their experiences, rebuild their self-esteem, and regain their voice. And then number three, that gradual progression only when the abuser has demonstrated consistent change and the victim feels secure, should that couples counseling be considered. And this is the beginning of the creating a safe and healing environment.
So, if you find this show brings you an awareness of what you may be going through in your relationship, then please love yourself more than you love your partner or abuser, and basically get help, right? So where do you find help? It's easier than you think. With a quick internet search in your community, okay, as well as, local church. Where do you go to church? Community billboards, and your Chamber of Commerce. Yes, your local Chamber of Commerce. They will know of nonprofit organizations that specialize in, guess what, emotional and mental health support, as well as abuse advocates to help you heal and recover safely.
Yeah. So as we said, this was a very heavy topic, but it's real, in real life. And we receive requests for the uncomfortable, hard parts of marriage and relationships, as well as all those easy parts. So we encourage you do the same for yourself. Confront and be brave to protect yourself. Now, make sure you hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you don't miss our next shows. You know what? And if you enjoyed this show and today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a thumbs up and a comment. It helps others find our show and join our community. We love this amazing community.
Yes, and share this episode, okay, with someone that it may be hard to talk to, but you know that, like, they are going through this, like, in a big way. You know that there's pain and frustration, and it could be just what they need. So connect with us and, share if you have or are going through this tough journey. Like we said, it's a heavy situation. So share it with us at Stephen and Corey on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. Also, follow us at Stephen and Corey Burgess on X as well. And if you enjoy listening to your podcasts, then follow us on Spotify and Rumble under our show name, Get It Together. Together. Get it together, right? So thank you for spending time with us today. And we'll see you next time on Get It Together.
Take care, everyone.